You basically want to make sure that your model is like constantly hitting these milestones and that it's constantly avoiding these minefields. Hopefully by the end of this process, you should see some patterns. These are kind of the key things I was expecting and whether or not those things actually happened. You should take this process seriously because it's a real way to systematically make improvements.
Welcome to episode 44 of Tool Use, the weekly conversation about AI tools and strategies brought to you by Anetic. I'm Mike Bird, and today we're talking about how to use evals to build and improve your AI products faster. We're joined by Freddie Vargus, who worked on evals for GitHub Copilot and is now the co-founder and CTO of Quotient AI, a platform that helps businesses measure and improve the performance of their generative AI systems. Freddie, welcome to Tool Use.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me.
Pumped to have you on. And would you mind giving the audience a little bit of your background and how you got here today?
I'm CTO and co-founder of Quotient AI, and I think long-term vision for Quotient for me is to be able to do in-the-loop steering for agents. So essentially, when agents are going through like their process of whatever, deciding to use tools or responding to users, or this whole kind of agentic loop that people often refer to, I want people to be able to send requests out to Quotient and for us to be able to automatically adjust how the agent behaves based off of historical data that we're capturing and how people and what people tell us basically about the type of behavior they want from their agents. And a lot of that has to do with evals. And so before Quotient, I worked at GitHub on the Copilot team, and myself and my co-founder, we basically built infrastructure and evaluation tooling for Copilot, the code completion product, and then kind of the beginning of a Copilot chat. And while I was doing that, I also worked on this project called Aya, which is basically a project that was in collaboration and through Cohere Labs, or what was previously known as Cohere for AI. And we basically built like a multilingual instruction tuned model. And a lot of my work was basically collecting human evals through that. So building a data annotation platform and basically making sure that people can very quickly and easily evaluate the models that we were trying to build. So I think so. Yeah, the last few years of my work has been spent on this. And before even any of all this, I've been working in the data and ML space basically since the beginning of my career. Worked at a crowdsourced quant fund for a while, an agriculture tech company, and like an e-commerce tech company. So I think this is the kind of space that has like a nice mix of software engineering, typical software engineering, systems problems, data problems, and I don't know, I guess you call them like operational problems, like trying to figure out how to prioritize and address issues.
Excellent. And I'm sure a lot of people have this question. Would you mind just telling us, why should people care about evals? People sometimes blend them with unit testing. People who build with AI can see the benefit to it, but I know there's still a big gap between the amount of people who do have evals and should have evals. So could you just shed some light on the benefit of actually setting them up?
Evals is an interesting thing because I think a lot of people kind of talk about it as if it's this thing that they definitely need without really understanding why. And I think for me, like the big reason why is to improve your product. And usually that comes from some kind of experience, right? Like the thing that I hear most often is that people will build up some product, they'll put it out for people to use, and they get some form of either complaints or feedback that basically says like, hey, this doesn't work for XYZ, and I was hoping it would do this thing. And that's, to me, is like a great signal to say, okay, you need a way to be able to figure out if you are able to address those issues, and that you don't regress on those issues, and basically have some kind of process to prioritize everything, right? Because you might get feedback from 10 people and you could go build stuff for all those 10 people, but you got to decide like how much time each of those things are going to take. You need to kind of like do some scoping. There's like a lot of there's a lot of I don't know, thought, I think, and intentionality that goes into that. I think some people are just like, oh, we'll just build, right? But I think if you are missing some kind of process, then it'll be difficult to know that you are like actively improving and not just like band-aid, like putting band-aids on problems. So that being said, right, if you have an application and you like have 5 users and like this is like small stakes, or this is just like friends, or like there's no inherent like risk, or like I don't know, this is just like a side project, something fun, then you don't need evals, right? Like this is more from like a standpoint of you are like serious about what you're building. You, I don't know, have people that are willing to pay, or you have people that like are really interested in using your product and you want to make it the best possible. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that like evals is something you should go do if you're not serious about what you're building either. Um, so yeah, I guess that's my current take on evals and like when you should use them. Um, and yeah, I have a lot of thoughts around like how to do it and like yeah, I guess why people should do it beyond the product improvement component. But yeah, we can get more into that. Yeah, however you want to, like whatever direction you want to go.
Cool. Yeah. I did have one question because I agree that you have to have a purpose for building the evals rather than just like a checkbox. And a lot of companies these days, rather than just offering a chat interface, will have some type of agentic capability, some type of tool calling. And you recently went over evaluating the tool calling capabilities and the ability to kind of eval that. Did you want to shed some light on that? How it differs from maybe just like a Q&A eval versus like a tool calling and a tool calling chain eval?
Like people will add tool calls into their applications, um, for a lot of different reasons, for a lot of different use cases. And I think the one, I don't know if I would call it a problem or a concern, but one of the things to think about is that does add like additional complexity. Like I think people will go and like build an app that all it does, like okay, here's how I would think about this. Like from in terms of like complexity, like the lowest form of complexity in some kind of like AI app to like highest form of complexity would be like the lowest form is I just write a basic, I don't know, system prompt or something, and I have maybe some UI or some way to get user input, and the user input comes in. I pass that along as part of like as the user prompt, or on top of like a user prompt template that I built or something like that in the system prompt to a model. The model goes and does a thing, returns a result, right? Like just single turn. The next level up is multi-turn, right? So I have the same kind of setup, but now when the model returns a response, the user can go ahead and respond to it like just like a conversation, and then the model gets that message appended to the existing conversation, right? So it kind of has like this context that's building up, and then people might go and add like an external database, so they start doing retrieval because they think like, okay, well, I want this model to be able to answer questions about some kind of content or some kind of data, or I want to be able to have access to some knowledge base or something like that. And then people might add in tool calls, and the tool calls might do something like goes and sends a request to an API because the data that's in the knowledge base is kind of static, or it doesn't change that often, or it's maybe something internal, and now the model needs to be able to do something that's a little bit more dynamic. And then people might also use tool calling to allow the model to decide how to retrieve documents for vector database. So this is all. So this is all just to say like doing the tool calling evals, like if you're building and you get to this point where like you're even thinking about this, like you're already at a higher level of complexity, then maybe, I don't know, you might be comfortable with from looking at eval stamp, like looking at evaluating applications. So that's kind of like just something I want to caveat all of this with. But yeah, so tool calling evals. So basically, the idea behind a tool call, right, is you tell the model, like, I have access to a function, and here are its arguments. Here's a description of the function, and it can be used for this thing. And the model will say, okay, like based off of what you just told me for like a given task, I want you to execute this tool. So your code goes and executes the tool, and then you give the model a response back, and then it does something that with that response. So that's like basically how like every tool works right now. There are some ways that people were doing tool calling differently before, or differently early on. But all this kind of comes down to is that you have a function in your code and it has arguments, and the internals of that function is kind of unknown to the model. So as far as like evaluating a tool call, there's kind of two ways that I look at a tool calling, eval, right? I would actually look at the first kind as like a form of executability test, just like any other unit test you would write. Completely like, and so this is completely like similar, it is entirely similar to like writing a regular unit test. So you have a function, take some arguments, and those arguments are going to have some kind of type, right? And they're going to have probably some form of validation on them. Like they can only be within a certain range, or they must have some kind of substring in it, or they need to have some kind of property, right? Um, and this is a type of like eval that you can do at any point. Like I probably wouldn't even call it an eval. I think that's just like adding some level of jargon to a concept that already exists. It's just like test like whether or not a function can be executed, right? Um, so yeah, so these kind of initial things like were the function arguments correct? Were the right function arguments used? So like if you have a required argument, right? Did that get used or not? Uh, do the like if the arguments are correct, right? Like let's say like you get like the like x equals 5 and y equals 2 to some kind of function, but they fail validation, right? Like that's just like another form of executability problem. But like yeah, that's like another component. So these are all things that you can kind of check for in any tool, because a tool is just again just kind of a function. Um, and then I guess the second piece of tool calling evals I would call like state dependency. Um, and then maybe there's like this kind of there's this other part like which is was the right tool used or relevant tool used, and we can probably go into that because further I could spend like a lot more time on that, but I think it's kind of a um a problem that you need to it's a very specific problem basically, and I don't think like it actually serves people well to look at that right away. But yeah, this like state dependency. So right, so let's say you have a function that a model can use as part of a tool call, and that tool goes and updates, or that function goes and updates a record in a database. You can go and check all these things I mentioned first for like executability, right? Like are the correct arguments provided, and did they pass validation, all these things. Like does the function execute without any errors? But the second component is the state. Like what does the database look like after the function gets executed? Um, and so like it might be like, okay, you check that there is one record added to the database if it's like an insert, or that a specific record has a specific value because it was an update, or something like that, or a delete, or any kind of these other operations. And a lot of things, right, that act as a database. So like, it could be like an API call that adds, a row to some like, I don't know, external SaaS product if that's like a tool that you built. But like you can go and check and see like, did that kind of object or that record get created? So that's the state dependency piece. And I think that these are different from doing like a question answering eval because the first kind, like the executability stuff, you don't need really much information, any like additional information to determine whether or not a function is executable, right? Like you have that, it's part of the code. There's no like domain expertise involved. You don't really even need user feedback for that. Maybe like I would say less about having user feedback and more just like seeing how the tool gets used by the model. So it's more like you're getting, I don't know, model feedback or something like that. And that model feedback can also tell you a lot of things, like whether or not your description was well thought out or like written well enough, or you define like your types or something like that accurately. Yeah, and so I think that's that first piece, and I think the other piece related to like the state dependency is like it just adds another. There is just another component involved, right? It's almost like it's just like a different form of ground truth, but it's at a system, very much like a, I don't know, external system level. It doesn't have much to do with the model. Maybe during a single tool call, but also like the fact that a database record got updated, you might need that to be true if the model later down the line makes another tool call that checks, I don't know, the database state. So, anyways, this is all to say, yeah, I guess like it definitely adds a lot more complexity, and you're also less focused on language at this point. It's more like uh, I don't know, records, some kind of like a record that you care about, and again, this like executability component.
There's a couple things I'd like to double click on to explore a little bit more. One was the mention of making sure the description is accurate so the correct tool was called. Um, I know a lot of people will just do something like a quick doc string to explain a function and maybe copy that into the prompt. But are there any strategies you found to help kind of isolate when a certain function should be used? One tangible example that I can think of is for in Cursor, I have an MCP set up with a few different tools. And sometimes they'll use fetch for web search. Other times they'll use Brave search for web search.
Hmm.
And you have to be really granular telling what to do. And I find that kind of defeats the purpose. But for more generic AI systems where they have a handful, a half dozen tools, are there any things users should keep in mind, or sorry, developers should keep in mind to help describe it so they can do a better job at directing the AI what to call for a given input?
It's funny you say this because I guess the if you have like two MCP servers that kind of serve the same purpose, or you have two tools that kind of serve the same purpose, I guess the first question that I would probably be asking was like would be like why did you add both of them, right? Like why do you have two of those things? There must be some there must be either a reason based off of I don't know like let's maybe like your users like asked you to support this type of like search tool because I don't know they don't trust one of them or something like that, or maybe there's like you don't want to have a single dependency, right? On just you don't have dependency on just like a single search provider, I guess. Like what if one of those goes down? Um, yeah, but like those types of reasons, like I think are kind of implicit, but like some usually it's like driven by something. So I think that's the first thing I do is like ask that question. So if the answer is like, um, I want one of these to be a backup, right? You should determine which one is your primary, which one's your secondary, right? Like this is like any other kind of system. So, and if you were to write this in code, right, you would say like, all right, like in my code, send a request to this one search API, and then if like I get back I don't know, 500 or something, fall back, go and then make another call, send another request, but to this other search API, right? Like that's the type of logic that you can codify. But for an LLM, right, because we are using language, you have to kind of describe it. So you can go and say like in your description for one of these search APIs, like this is the default one, like always use this one unless you get I don't know anything other than a 200 back. And then if you get anything other than a 200, fall back to this other tool, right? So I think that's like a problem that you can. I think that's a problem that's easily dealt with. Um, but you just kind of need to be upfront about, or like be like honest about like what it is, like why you did that. It's easy. It's very easy to just add stuff, right? Like MCP servers, like all right, here you just add another line to a little JSON file, right? And you just keep adding them. You're like, cool, my model has like all the tools I care about. But what you're doing is you're just adding more complexity into your app. So, uh, you got to like figure out like you got to ask yourself like why am I doing this? Um, I know that's not like probably the answer you want to hear, but there's not like a silver bullet. I think that there's techniques that people will try and that people have tried to develop or look to develop for this type of thing. Like they might have like I don't know some form of like router or something like that, which is usually what that is like I don't know they wrote some heuristics about like when to use one thing versus the other, or they have a model that just they came up with a prompt with they came up with a prompt for it, and then let that model decide what to call, and then kind of like make that specialized, and then let the other model use it. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of how I would look at it. Um, and yeah, you can also maybe like think about like relevance. Like there's another thing, like there's other techniques people have looked at. Like okay, I'm gonna compare I don't know the user request. I'm gonna take like a similarity score over that with like a function description. And if it's above some threshold, then I pick that. Then I pick that tool versus another one. But it's kind of just like it's just a different way of addressing the same problem. And then if you go and do something in an automatic way like that, then you have to tune it, right? Like you have to run some examples through or see how users use your application, and then see like, all right, did the tool get used when I expected it to be used? So um, that's how I would look at it, at least. Yeah, I don't think there's gonna be something that like magically solves your problem, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of this is going to come back to what are users actually using it for? Where's the ambiguity? And if you can make a data set for your eval of just either inputs or just general usage that is ambiguous and just see how the LM handles it and adjust your prompt or descriptions accordingly, probably the best way to go about it.
Mhm.
The other thing I'd like to touch on is the concept of kind of blending two things you already brought up. One is the multi-turn and the other is the tool use. So if you had a plan, do you have a strategy for evaluating adherence to the plan? Like how can you make sure it calls tool A, B, C in the correct order? Or
Mhm.
is it just going to be more of the same? Just, create your data set, test it, look at the data.
Yeah. Okay. So the single turn versus multi turn. So I actually think single turn, but looking at single turn versus multi turn is kind of a trap, to be honest. I know I mentioned like I used that wording before, but I think I really this the way I would actually look at it is like, what are the types of things, across different requests that you want your model or your agent or whatever term you want to use, like what do you want it to be able to do? And then also, what are the types of things that you don't want it to do? And those things you're not going to know right away. Like you might have like a couple in mind, and that's fine. Like you should make note of those. But you're going to learn more of those over time. And I think if you frame it like that, then to me, there's no difference between single turn and multi turn. Right? Like if I have a model that, I don't know, does something in one turn, like let's say, all right, maybe let's say I have, I don't know, an e-commerce agent, an e-commerce chat app or something, and maybe it has access to a couple tools. But let's say like a user comes in and asks a question about a refund, and I definitely don't want the model that like when somebody asks about a refund, I don't ever want it to just say like, oh yeah, we'll totally give you a refund, right? It doesn't really matter if the user asked that on step one or like turn one, or if they asked it on turn five. I don't want the model to be able to do that. Okay, so that's why I would look at it as like things you want to do and things you don't want to do, because the kind of the turn at which it happens isn't as important. You might One thing that might be important is like sequencing, right? So you might care that like certain things happen in a certain order. So if you have like tools, for example, that get called, like I don't know, you have a tool that looks up the user's information, looks up the items that they've ordered, or looks up like their order history, and then you have a tool that like issues a refund, right? You might want to make sure that like the user gets like make sure that the model looks up the user first and looks at their order history first before they issue a refund. You don't want them to issue a refund without looking up what orders they've made. So that might be important. Um, so, but yeah, I guess like your question about the kind of like plan adherence piece is, yeah, I guess I would say like look at these types of like look at and like think about these types of behaviors that you want. Think about if the sequencing is important, and then make note of those, because kind of anything that happens in between might not even really matter, right? Like as long as those kind of steps occur, like you can call that like a well, some people for like agents will call this like a good trajectory. Um, I would just say like yeah, like I don't know. You had a good it had a successful it like completed the task or had some kind of like successful conversion or whatever, but you can call it a trajectory if you want. So yeah, this is one of those instances where like yeah, you're gonna look at like users using your application. You want to capture like what they're doing and what the model's doing, and that includes things like tool calls or just like text responses, and uh and you're going to want to build up some set of like you basically a data set of these good states and bad states. And yeah, and at that point like that's when you would go and like make changes to any of your prompts, or uh, if you're make changes to like your planning, or make changes to the system prompt, or whatever like you decide is like the right thing to do, um, and then go and run like these examples, run run some examples through your application, and then check to see like, all right, did these good paths get hit, and were these bad paths avoided? Some other times people use for this is like milestones and minefields. I've heard of this mentioned more in the context of tool calling. But a milestone is basically just like key states, like, or key like tool calls that needs to occur in the correct order, or like in a specific order. So like milestone is like, I don't know, e-commerce agent example, right? Like I think this might be a good one, but like let's say like every time a conversation starts for your e-commerce agent, you always want it to look up a user's order history, right? Like that's a key milestone for you. Because if you don't have the order history, then uh, you basically won't be able to. I don't know, let's say you basically determine that you won't be able to go and handle anything else, like make a return, let the user make a return, go issue them a refund, do an exchange, things like that. Um, and then a minefield, what it is just the opposite. It's any kind of invalid action, any invalid tool call that that might occur. So again, like you might care about the ordering here. So in this case, like if you issue a user a refund, you call, or let's say if the model calls the issue refund, tool before having the order history, then you wouldn't want that, right? That's basically you've hit a minefield. Like you failed, and that's the model has failed, and you basically have this bad, I don't know, trajectory, like I used that term that I was using earlier. Um, and the way I would like use those is like you basically want to make sure that like your model is like constantly hitting these milestones, and that it's constantly avoiding these minefields. So how I would go and like build like a data set of this maybe would be like let's just first I would, you know what, I would assume that you have some kind of tool in place that like logs all the inputs and outputs of like your model, and also all the tool calls. So let's assume you have that. And if you don't, then maybe we should talk more about the whole process of this. But because I feel like we kind of got in the weeds right now. But um, uh, I think yeah. So I would say like, all right, here's like an example user request. Here is the model responses, the model response to this, and here's like the tool calls. Like get the actual response, the actual actions that the model like uh did, right? Um, and then I would say like, all right, like here is just a list of the tool calls that I want to make sure, like I want to make sure these tool calls happen. And then I also have a separate list, which are the minefields, and say like I want to make sure that these minefields are not happening. Okay. And then if I were to go evaluate this, I would say, okay, I would maybe write like a unit test style, or whatever you want to do. Like you could write like a unit test that says, okay, send the request, get the model response, look at all the tool calls that occur, pull out the tool calls from like your message history, right? These like list of dictionaries if you're in Python, and then do one pass that checks, okay, did the first tool call match the first milestone, the list of milestones? So the second tool call, or did we hit was the second milestone, did it come after the first one? Did the third milestone come after the second one? Right? Like did we hit all of these in order? And then for minefields, same thing. Like did any of these minefield, or not something, but did any of these minefields get hit at any point in between any of the tool calls? And if they get hit at any point, then basically you have like a failed test. Um, like you just basically end right there. So that's how I maybe build like a small data set, and this kind of involves like, yeah, looking at data, seeing how like, and making note of the things that you want to happen, that you don't want to happen.
Yeah, excellent. And I actually wouldn't mind going back to like what you said. What are some strategies or approaches that people should keep in mind for collecting this initial data set? How besides just like manually going in and getting every single one for the good state, bad state, is there any way to automate it? Or even if they do it manually, how do you suggest storing it so it can feed into the system? Like what's a good introductory way for a user to start building up this data set to ensure they have a good flow and consider edge cases?
Yeah, so I think the simplest way to start would be have some kind of database. So you could have a SQL database, you could have like basically anywhere that you can store like basically anywhere that you can store some kind of data in some format that has like a column or a label. Um, and basically what you want to do with this is you want to look at your application. You want to like in your application, whenever a user sends like a request, and what I mean by this is like they type something into like a chat box or a chat like a chat window or something like that. Like that's the user request. You call that user request, um, or the task or whatever. Like it's user input, right? Uh, you and somewhere in your application, you're going to take that user input. You're going to feed it along to an LLM, and then the LLM is going to respond with some kind of text response or a tool call or whatever. But basically, what that's going to amount to is some like again, if you're like in Python, if you're in Python land, like a list of dictionaries potentially, or just like one dictionary that you get back. Um, if you're in TypeScript, whatever, like an object. Um, and yeah, and like that's going to cover that's like the two things you definitely want to. You basically want to take those two things and you want to save them to that database. Um, and I guess the way I would do it is like, uh, yeah, set this up in a way that like you can write it to I don't know Postgres database or whatever, and then I don't know if you have no users, what you can start doing is you can write like a script that you could use another LLM, and you kind of just come up with like a scenario, or you describe like your application. So you could say like I am building an e-commerce app, whatever, like role play as a user, like like different kinds of users. And you could come up with those different kinds of users yourself, kind of leave it up to the LLM. Like whatever. This the kind of the point of this is just to get something rolling. Um, and you can have it essentially generate like responses. Sorry, not responses, but the response from this like script will be the input for your actual app. So, um, so you can start there, and you could just have it generate like I don't know 100 of these things, right? Feed them all through your application, and you get all these responses back from your application. And if it's like chat style, you can do this back and forth, right? Like you can have like this role playing model that's like simulating a real user, and you have like your actual model, which is like your product. And when the chat response comes back, gets fed into this other script that gets sent to this other model, that comes back, and then you have this kind of like interleaved conversation, right? And you can let that go as long as you want. Like you can put like a limit on it, like all right, after whatever five turns, like stop, or I don't know, just let it go kind of infinitely. That's one way to start. That's like a way to handle like the I don't know cold start problem. The other way to do it is like you send stuff out to your friends, you put it on the internet, but that's not really going to change what you're storing or anything like that. But hopefully by the end of this process, hopefully by the end of this, like whether you put it on the internet and have people use it, or you have an LM use it, or use it yourself, um, you should hopefully have like 100+ examples of actual conversations that your app produced. Um, okay, so now what do you do with that, right? So I actually think a lot of people don't do this and don't want to do this, to be completely honest. But the next thing would be to take all those inputs and outputs and I don't know, put them in a spreadsheet or something. Like we did this with like several companies we worked with in the past, like when we first started Quotient, and this was like way before there was like lots of tooling that people were building before we even had anything. And you put that into a spreadsheet, and you're gonna just go through each of those conversations like one by one. And what you're gonna do is like read the back and forth, and you're gonna make some notes about what you liked, what you didn't like things that you think went well, things that didn't go well. This is a good point where you can track like milestones and minefields. Like, okay, it checked out the order history for this e-commerce app, for my e-commerce app, or it didn't do this. So that these types of things, and you're gonna also just say like, was this sufficient or was this not sufficient? So kind of like a good or bad label. And you can do this all in like Google Sheets. This is very easy to do. And at the end of this, well, actually, not even at the end, through this process, probably after the first 10 interactions or conversations, you should hopefully start to see some kind of pattern. If they're all very different, then okay, that's fine. Just like keep going. Like I would get through 100. That's a that's a good round number because and the reason why I say 100 is because at the end you can see like, all right, like I can very easily calculate how many sufficient or insufficient, kind of conversations I had that were had. But yeah, but hopefully by the end of this process, you should see some patterns. You should be able to see like, all right, these are kind of the key things I was expecting, and whether or not those things actually happen. So I would say like that's kind of like the process. Now I think realistically, there's a lot of different things that can happen there. But what I think often happens, like or most often happens, is um you will get like I guess what might happen is like somebody like a lot of people might think like okay like the model's gonna go make all these like bad tool choices or all these bad tool calls, or it's gonna like do all these like very weird things that like I didn't expect. But I think majority of the time it's just like it's a lot like dumber than that. Um, like for example, I don't know, maybe like in the application the model like maybe something silly. Like let's say the model just like constantly refuses to give a refund because of some reason, right? But then you see this, you're like, why does it stop? Why won't it give a refund, right? And then I don't know, maybe you go look at your prompt and you see that you put something in there like, oh, don't give refunds unless XYZ happens. And then you can say like, all right, well, actually, did XYZ happen? And you just go look at those examples again. You might find that like, oh yeah, like this thing didn't happen, so it didn't give the refund. But I don't want it to like, and now you're like, all right, well, I don't want it to be so aggressive about not giving refunds. So I might go change something about my prompt and then rerun these examples through again and then see like, did it go from being that like an insufficient conversation or like a bad conversation to like a good one, right? Did it actually do something? Did it actually like change? Um, because and yeah, and that's the good thing about having this like spreadsheet and this data set, which is basically a data set, right? Because you can like run these examples again later and see like if you go from 50% bad to 20% bad or something like that. But um, so yeah, so I guess I'm trying not to lose my train of thought here, but that's kind of like the process for all of those things. And then the other thing to take into account that's actually really important is when you're like doing this kind of annotating or this labeling, uh, I would actually say like think about who needs to do that, right? Like if for some reason like you are the expert, like you know exactly everything that should happen, then great. But like if you're building something in like a particular domain, let's say you build a site for like law, or let's say you're not an e-commerce expert, you really know a lot about like consumer products, but you have no idea how like I don't know customer support agent should or how a customer support agent should actually act in real life. Then you might need like someone who works in customer support to do that to actually build up a good sense of like what behavior should look like to you. I think that's where some people will like. I don't know if it's. I would say like that's where some people will go wrong. Um, it's okay to start on your own, but at some point, like you need to decide what level of like what's the expectation you want to set. Do you want this to be? Do you want your application to be like this super professional thing that matches this type of domain, or is it just like something that you just want people to feel like is okay and like kind of gets the job done? Um, so yeah, that's how I would look at it. You don't, and again, you don't need anything special to get started. Like I mentioned, like a Postgres database to store some stuff, and then a spreadsheet, and that kind of gets you going pretty quickly. And then beyond that, the automation piece on this. So you might be thinking like maybe you're thinking like, all right, well I had 100 examples. Now what if I have like 1,000? I have 10,000. I have a million. There is no way, and this is where people I still think sort of give. There's no way you're going to go look through a million conversations. Okay, let's like be realistic. I don't think I've ever looked at a million conversations, and I've looked at a lot of data and labeled a lot of data. Um, so something you can do, right, is you could do any like the simplest thing you could do, right, is say like, all right, I have determined based on labeling all this data, make all these notes, some classes of issues, right? And I can go take these class of issues and I can write them into a prompt, or I can be even lazier and ask an LM to summarize all the issues by give it just like these hundred rows of notes, and then I can have an LM like I basically have like another prompt that's like I'm treating as like my own personal labeling tool, and I can ask the model to just continuously label more data for me, right? So the 101st row that comes in, I can ask the model like, hey, like, you know, tell me what class issue this is, and in the prompt you have all these things that you summarized, or another model, or you had another model summarize. Um, and then I think at that point you just need to determine frequency, because these things can get expensive. Like people often like reference like, okay, you can use LM to automate this, you can have it automate this thing, and then at the end of everything, like you're paying for the number of tokens times like 5, because you have your primary app and then you have like 4 tools or something like that. But you might want to do some like sampling over it. But now you have all these extra examples, and over time, like these like issues might change, so you might want to like re-summarize or re-aggregate these issues using fresh data, because you don't want to be stuck on the same issues realistically. So maybe after the first 100, if you get to like if you get to like, I don't know, 80% satisfaction rate, or 80% like accurate, quote unquote, like accuracy rate, then like now maybe you're probably going to start running into other classes of issues. So keep those original examples, but now start to add in fresh ones. And in order to do that, you need fresh data. So that's another way to automate. Um, yeah, there's so much other things you can do there though, but um, that's how I would get it. Oh, that's the probably the oh, and also, okay, the last thing I'll end with is like, this might sound like a lot, right? But like, you could probably do this like, okay, if you're like sit down and like you focus, you could probably do like get this going within like just in a day. This is not like the process itself. I think there's like a lot of things to keep in mind, but it's not like a super long drawn out process to get going. Um, Otherwise, I would say like if you don't have the time and you really can't do this like in a full day, and you're like, I gotta ship stuff out, I gotta fix bugs, all this stuff, then I don't know, treat it like a 1 week sprint or something. So every day you label 10 examples or 20 examples or something like that. And then by the end of the week, you can say, all right, let me review what happened. Um, kind of checkpoint myself, have my V0 of my first eval data set, and then improve from there. So um, and yeah, so that's how I would look at it. But um, yeah, I think that again, like a lot of people don't like to do this. So and you don't have to necessarily, again, if you're not serious about your product.
Great points. One thing that I hear a lot of, which I think could tie into this, is the concept of the LLM as a judge, where if people aren't willing to look at their data, and I do agree that's pinnacle, that's the best way to know because you actually get to see what's going in and out of these systems. A lot of people try to offload that to an LLM and just say, hey, Claude, do this categorizing for me. Make sure you audit, like, will it match these requirements? And then just try to automate the whole process. And what concerns me about that is they rarely, from my experience, will include this 100 human like done examples to actually give it the quality it needs. Do you think LM as a judge is better than nothing? Do you think it can lead to more issues? Do you think it needs sufficient prep of like human annotated data, or what's your stance on that?
I actually like LM as a judge from like a I don't know, as like a technique. So I'm positively biased towards it, but I don't think it comes for free, because I guess the way I look at it is like every time you come up with a new prompt for a new purpose, in order to verify whether or not that is actually doing what you want it to do, you need to have some kind of examples to reference. Um, yeah, like the like it, like it's like you need to be able to, it's just like you're measuring, your AI app with you know your application's prompt, and you're checking and like evaluating all these kind of like good or bad conversations or whatever. You got to do the same thing for your judge, because like how do you know it's going to be reliable, right? Like what if you have this prompt and you basically write out this little rubric that like this tells the judge like this is what makes a good conversation, or like a satisfactory conversation. It kind of like hits all these things, and you get points for all these different parts of it. Um, and then you ask them as a judge to go and like label things, or sorry, yeah, either label things or like evaluate, quote unquote, uh, uh, these interactions in your application. but then you put all those same data points in front of, I don't know, an expert, like a domain expert, like a customer support example, like a customer support agent. And then you have them look at it and they say like, all right, all these things make sense. Like these are all, like they put all these good labels, all these bad labels. And then LLM judge does the same thing. And then you see that like the LLM judge and the customer support, the human customer support agent only agree like for 20% of the examples, right? Like you have a choice. You might say, oh, well, the LLM is a judge. The LLM is going to be is smarter than this person, but like that's just like it seems like a poor choice. Um, so at that point, you need to decide like, all right, well, like I would just say like it's best practice to just rely on humans that actually have like more domain expertise than LLM because uh because if you're serious about building an application, that's probably why you're even thinking about evals to begin with. So you should take this process seriously, um, because it's like a real way to like systematically make improvements. Um, so yeah, I guess the what you need to be able to do there though is like make sure that like if you in that scenario, you need to go make changes to LM Judge prompt and you need that feedback from you need to be able to do that based on the customer support, you know, agents kind of notes and feedback and all these things. And then you need to go and run the on some new examples again, have some new customer support like a new human or a new human labels and then see like all right, can you get to like 80% agreement? Some people might call this aligning the LM judge to human. Um but yeah, you just basically check. You can just do a very basic check of like, do these things, do the labels equal each other, and take that the kind of the average over all of those things. So, um, and then yeah, whether or not to use it from a standpoint of like cost or something like that, like I would use it for like maybe I would use it maybe like in the process of uh for like if you have like a need for speed, so to speak. Like if you're like, all right, I really need to get through a bunch of things. I really don't have a good sense of how this is performing, and also maybe you've just been slacking, right? Like realistically, like people get lazy when they do evals. They get to 80% like accuracy on their first data set or 90% accuracy, something like that, and they're like, all right, now like I'll just give up or something. And then they come back later and they're like, wait a minute, no, my app sucks again. So what do I do? So you could do if you're like you could have an LLM judge to like speed up that process and figure out what's going on. Um, but it's not like a silver bullet. And again, like you're paying for like the token cost and all these. You could also just treat it like a sampler. Like you do it every certain number of conversations, and then you also mix in human human annotations or whatever. But there's also probably, depending on the use case, I would say like majority of the time you probably don't even need LM as a judge. I actually look at LM as a judge as being a really good um, check for a model specific problems and not like application level problems. And it might seem like a little bit of a hard distinct, like maybe sometimes saying that, I think like it's kind of hard to distinguish, but I think it's more like what things are inherently like issues with the potential like with the model versus inherently like issues with the model output in the context of your app. Okay, so if it's so for like the context of your app, it might be um like yeah, these I don't know, using the milestones minefield example, like do specific tools get called in certain orders and all those things. But it might also just be like really simple stuff like really simple checks, like make sure that the model response isn't that long, like that's less than I don't know 70 characters, because I don't want my users to be reading like you know basically like a whole report for every single thing they ask, right? Or every like interaction. That seems silly. Or maybe like I want to make sure that the model says definitely doesn't say these types of words or these or definitely does say these words, or make sure that it mentions the company name, make sure it never mentions like I'm GPT or something like that. Like these are all things that you can like write really simple code checks for and simple unit tests for. Um, and then you can use LM as a judge for like these like kind of stylistic things, or these things that you can kind of come up if you can come with like a rubric basically, like like a guide that you would give to a real human, which a lot of people don't have experience with. Like this, like if you have experience in the data annotation space, like you probably have done this, but a lot of people don't. But like basically what you do is you, if you were to give it to a human, you say like, all right, like here's a rubric, just like in school, you get like, okay, does this properly address the question, well, in this way, give it 1 point if this, 3 points if this, 5 points if this, whatever. And then you kind of add up all the points at the end and you get like a total score. Like, yeah, if you can build one of those, then you can use them as a judge for that. Um, so yeah, so that's on like the application specific stuff. I like to think of LM as a judge being good for like checking things like hallucinations, checking things like um, I think of it as a good technique maybe for tool relevancy checks, um, looking for like things like uh, looking for problems across a data set, like across a set of historical data. So not just look at it, don't treat it as like, okay, it's just evaluating, or it's not just evaluating one example, but it's like looking at things in aggregate. I find that it's really good for those types of problems. Because like hallucination, right, is like, and some people have like different definitions for this, but it's like a response from your model or an action from your model that's not grounded in some context, right? Um, at least like that's what we use. So I might use LM as a judge for that because like uh you know the it's basically saying you basically give it like, here is, I don't know, the context, here is the what the user asked for, like, and here's the response. Make sure that like nothing in the response it like doesn't match up to what's in like the actual context here or something like that. If you were to do it in like a kind of really simple way, because otherwise it's just kind of hard to check. It's like one of those things that's kind of hard to check, I think, with heuristics. Um, so yeah, that's what I would use LM as a judge for, at least. Um, so I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think for me, like when I just think about these types of problems, it's more about just simplifying as much as possible. Like think, just you gotta think. And I think people are really used to not thinking right now because they're quick to like move fast on things, leverage LLMs for everything, and just like constantly like be pushing things forward. But sometimes you do need to take like that 30-minute pause. Like I really don't think like a 30-minute pause is going to make or break like how things go for you. If so, then either you're in a very unique position and you're going to be either, and you might become very, very rich at the end of it, or like your priorities are in a different place. And I think, or like I'd say you're either going to get very rich because if that 30 minutes is going to make or break your app, then like you must have like a ton, like a huge surge of people coming in. But otherwise, like if it makes or breaks like your product or your application or your project, um, then yeah, maybe it's worth reconsidering what you're working on, or reconsidering like how you're spending your time.
Hearing you just got to think sometimes might be the best advice that's been given on this show, because it's true. People are just reliant on AI far too much. But Freddie, this has been a blast. I really appreciate the insights you've shared. But before we let you go, is there anything you'd like the audience to know?
If you want to find me, I'm on the internet as Freddie V4, pretty much everywhere. On X, Freddie underscore V4. If you're building AI applications, you're building agents, you have concerns over accuracies, inaccuracies, hallucinations, you're thinking about whether or not your models are using tools correctly. We're building both tooling like an SDK and models to help find these types of problems. Yeah, reach out to me on the internet there, or you can find my email. My email is freddie@quotientai.co. And yeah, I guess otherwise, if you also need help building agents, I'm also always very interested to hear what people are trying to do. So if you want to hack on an agent, like we can do that. And I would love to, if we can use Quotient to help, great. But I'm really more concerned about like just working with people and like learning more about their problems and figuring out what I can do to help them. So Yeah, that's really all I want to leave people with.
Perfect. Sounds like a great idea. And also, I got to say, the Quotient AI blog, full of good stuff. So hope you'll check it out. We'll link everything down below. But Freddie, have yourself a good one. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks for having me.